Welcome to Modding 101. Today's lesson is load order, A to ESL. Come on in, sit back and relax. Eyes forward, let's learn something. Here we go. Class Summary, the basic cheat sheet. This class summary provides the very basics of the video. The following sections go in depth to cover what module load order is and the importance of understanding it. We also touch upon what modules are, some basics of conflicts and overrides, load order differences between game types, and more. On its face, load order is the order in which modules, ESMs, ESPs, and ESLs load into the game. This is important because mods that affect the same records overwrite those that load before them. What loads last wins. Sometimes, overwrites are not only okay, but it's what you want. Other times, you want to adjust module position for a better outcome, including but not limited to crash prevention. Games are designed to handle a total of 255 modules before they stop working. ESL Aware Games have a much higher, almost unreachable limit when incorporating ESL files and ESPs flagged with ESL. Modules load into the game based on the plugin's text file located in app data. However, you generally never have to worry about even opening this file, as mod managers edit it for you based on what you do within them. Various manager tutorials are provided, and more are on the way. To adjust your load order, you simply drag and drop the modules you've installed. Managers such as Vortex, instead of dragging and dropping, have you enter user rules. ESMs are generally forced to load before ESPs and can only be sorted amongst their own file type. There are exceptions to this. You'll notice when trying to drag certain modules that they don't always follow this rule. It's nothing to worry about, but there is more to know if desired. Summary over. That was the very basics of load order. It's simple on its face and at its end, but there is a good bit of information in the center. Now knowing what you've just heard, you are on your way to installing and arranging mods. For those interested in fully grasping what load order is, to be able to make better decisions when modding, join me as we go forward. Sit back, relax. Don't let the information overwhelm you. Take breaks if you need to. You can always rewatch the video and ask questions. What is this load order you've heard so much about? Module load order is the order in which modules load into the game. The term module covers files with the extensions .esp, .esl, and .esm. The game's main file, official DLC, Creation Club mods, and many free-to-use mods are on this list. These files are placed into the game's data folder, as this is where the game accesses them from. They are placed here by the game itself, manually by the user, and or via a mod manager. Some managers, Mod Organizer for example, do not place them in the data folder, but rather load them into the game through their own system. Mod Organizer does this to keep the data folder mod-free, which helps avoid the need to reinstall the game if things get messy. Every mod manager shows load order and allows you to adjust it. That's their main purpose. Some display it differently than others, but they all have it. They also allow you to deactivate individual modules if you don't want or need them instead of completely removing them. This is helpful for managers that offer multiple profiles where you want to play the game differently on each one. Different managers allow for different ways of doing this. From Morrowind to Fallout 76, module load order can only have a total of 255 active regular modules before the game stops working, so keep an eye on your list. Fallout New Vegas broke this function and starts to act strange around 110 whether the modules are active or not. The 64-bit games are a bit luckier. The ESL extension and ESL flag were introduced for them. No matter how many ESL files you have, their total number only counts towards a single spot within this limit. 100 ESL mods only occupy a single spot in the 255 limit. This is expanded upon later. Along with modules, mods may also come with asset files, textures, meshes, animations, so on. Those files are not a part of this order. The way the assets load into the game can vary depending on the mod manager you use. Ignore them for now to avoid information overload. There's enough as is. I'll cover assets in the asset load order video. So, modules. You know what they look like. You know they have a number limit. What exactly are they? A module is a compilation of records with attributes and values, an information container, a database. These databases determine everything from movement speeds to NPC routine. There are records that determine weapon stats, others for how bright lights are. Some records exist to allow models an entry point into the game, where other records are then created to place those models around the world. There are records for almost everything that you can think of. Now, when two or more modules edit the same record, this creates a conflict. While many conflicts are fine, sometimes they call for an adjustment. Adjusting load order can seem overwhelming at first, but there is a lot of leniency with it. Sometimes, that leniency is where the confusion comes from. The best tip that anyone could give you here is to not add 100 mods in one go, then attempt to troubleshoot afterwards. Learn everything you can about each mod that you are installing as you install them, and adjust as you go. Mod descriptions are your friend. If there is no placement specification, the module can most likely load anywhere. Within this section, we cover the major reasons as to when load order adjustment becomes important. Here we touch upon module records that override and conflict with each other. Don't be overwhelmed by the technical stuff. This is all just for you to have a better understanding of what's going on within your load order. Modules load into the game from highest to lowest, the highest position being the lowest priority, the lowest position being the highest priority. Take a moment to digest that. Modules loading higher in numerical priority, lower in physical position, win in terms of what shows up in game. If a plugin at priority 5 alters the same record as a plugin at priority 6, those module 5 records will be ignored by the game. The rest of module 5's records will show up as expected. This competition of modules creates either what is called an override or a conflict. Overrides occur when a single module changes the value of a record in a master file, one record being altered by only one other file. These can generally be ignored, as they are doing what you would expect them to do. Example: the Skyrim SE mod Torch Brightness Radius increases the light radius of torches. You can see that it doubles the vanilla radius of 512, making it 1024. If by chance Torch Brightness Radius could and did load before the Skyrim ESM, then the game's torchlight radius would only illuminate a radius of 512 around the player instead of the intended 1024. Now, conflicts occur when two or more modules change the value of the same record in the same master file. These need additional consideration. Example: I've created a mod called Torch Brightness Redux and loaded it after Torch Brightness Radius. These modules both affect the light radius value of their Skyrim ESM master. This is a conflict, two mods changing the same value of a master. Because Redux loads after Radius, the game's torchlight radius will only illuminate at a radius of 721 around the player. If I change my load order so that the Radius module loads after Redux, then the radius value of 1024 is what shows up in game. Keep in mind that there can and will be mods that have a number of conflicts within them. Load order becomes even more important in those situations. Gopher provides a great example of this in the provided video. Every module has the potential to overwrite the records loaded before it. If none of your mods affect the same records, then load order doesn't matter as much. But the likelihood of a no conflict, no override load order lowers with each mod you install. When conflicts arise, you want to make sure that what you want to show up in game does. The only way to know what mod you want to show up over another one is by reading mod descriptions and testing them out. Load the mods that conflict in different positions. Go in game and see what changes have taken place. Sometimes, when things act strange due to mod conflict, the only solution is to decide what mod you like better and delete the other one. When you are comfortable with load order, you can start using Xedit, the app that I've been showing you, to see what records conflict between modules and make changes on a record-to-record basis for a more desirable and better functioning game. Consider that advanced modding, and don't overwhelm yourself with it right now. There's plenty of time for that later. The official Xedit playlist is provided and is continuously growing. Unlike conflicts and overrides, where some mods need to load before others so that you have a better working and more desirable game, some modules actually require others to load before them to work at all. These files that are relied upon are known as masters of other modules. Let's start with the simplest and most obvious. Downloadable content, DLC, requires that the main game module loads before it to work. This is because DLC, like all mods, are built on top of the main file. DLC adds to, uses, and alters records from it. Here are some examples. Fallout 4. One of the things that the Far Harbor DLC does is add a boat to the Commonwealth so that you can use it to travel to Far Harbor. To add this boat, the DLC has to reference the existing Commonwealth cell. If the main game file doesn't load before the DLC, as far as Far Harbor is concerned, this cell doesn't exist. The game then errors out, essentially imploding on itself, and among other issues, it crashes. Modules can't search forwards for records. They can only search backwards on the numerical priority list. Another example, Skyrim. The Dawnguard DLC adds this entrance to Dayspring Canyon. This entrance allows you access to the area where Fort Dawnguard is. If for some reason Dawnguard loaded before the game's main file, it wouldn't be able to find the cell record it references to add this passageway, and among other lost references, the game will crash. Mods work the same way. While all mods build on top of the main game file, and potentially the DLC, sometimes they also build upon other mods. If a mod does this, the author will tell you in the mod description. Some mod managers will tell you if a mod has masters and if they are missing. You can also use Xedit to figure this out. Be sure to load his or her mod after the specified requirements. If you are missing a master, this is generally what happens. There you see. Patches are also a good example of this. Patches are created to make two or more mods work together. This means a patch has to load after all of the mods it patches. If it doesn't, it won't be able to find the records it's adjusting to make the other mods compatible with one another. In this case, the game will either crash or not function correctly. If there is enough interest, I'll create a patch creation video for the Xedit playlist. To actually move modules, all that you have to do, as I'm sure you know by now, is drag and drop them. Vortex Mod Manager is an exception to this. Vortex doesn't allow you to drag and drop. Instead, it provides a way to enter user rules to force certain mods to load after others. If modules don't have masters or conflicts, they can be placed anywhere that they are allowed to move. While modules can be moved freely throughout your load order, some games have position limitations. A note before moving forward. Within this section, I mentioned flags. Flags are switches within plugins that give specific direction. Some file extensions force flags to plugins, which we cover, but the user can also add and remove flags using Xedit. ESL flags are covered in the provided ESL video, as they are a bit more advanced and require additional explanation. Once you understand load order, consider checking the ESL video out on the Xedit playlist. Pre-ESL games are the Fallout and Elder Scrolls releases that were yet to implement the ESL flag and .ESL extension. These games, in regard to the order that they are allowed to load, ignore file extensions altogether. The reason that .esp files generally only load after .esms is because .esm extensions, by default, come with an ESM flag. Modules with the ESM flag load before modules without it. ESPs can also be given an ESM flag, but the user has to do it themselves. Some authors do this to force their mods to load before others so that they are less likely to overwrite records that they shouldn't. However, if everyone did this, the flag would begin to lose part of its purpose. Oblivion, Fallout 3, and Fallout New Vegas load and sort files based on their modification date time, or timestamp. Skyrim Legendary Edition The 32-bit one loads modules based on the plugin's text file. The plugin's text file is located within your user account, app data, local, the game title, plugins.txt. Pre-ESL Aware Games plugin text can also change the order of where the DLC loads. Mod managers and loot adjust all of these things accordingly, including altering timestamps for the necessary games. They do this based on where you place modules in your load order. There is no need to mess with the plugin's text doc unless you have specific reasons to do so. Make sure your mod managers are set up correctly and adjust from there. Games that are able to use the ESL flags and extensions, such as Skyrim SE and Fallout 4, work a bit differently than previous games. The game's main module, DLC, and Creation Club mods are hard-coded in order with no option to change that. Only after the aforementioned are loaded into the game, the plugins.txt file is then read to load everything else, and extensions are considered here. Again, mod managers alter this file based on your choices within the manager itself. There is generally little to no need to alter the text file directly. We use mod managers for various reasons, and this is one of them. Here we dig a bit deeper into what the module extensions actually mean and do. .esm files are known as master modules. Though they are called master modules, they are not necessarily masters of other mods. They are restricted to being sorted at the top of your load order. ESMs can all be sorted amongst each other, but they will always load before modules that are not ESMs. Try to move them, and you'll see that they can only go so far. For this file type, the game sets a record flag, ESM, in memory. For ESL Aware Games, even if you use Xedit to remove the ESM flag, it still loads into the game as if both are there due to the file extension. .esl files are light master modules. They are essentially an ESM with limitations. Obviously, games that are not ESL aware do not and cannot utilize ESL modules. For this file type, the game sets both an ESM and ESL flag in memory. Like .esms, they are restricted to the top of your load order and are organized amongst them. Again, try to move them and you'll see that they only move so far. Due to how ESL aware engines work, even if you use Xedit to remove the ESL or ESM flag, they still load into the game as if both are there due to the file extension. The first major difference between .esm and .esl is that ESL flagged plugins are limited to 2,048 new records. Once that limit is reached, the plugin crashes your game and/or can corrupt your save file. The second difference requires some additional background. Some game data folders have a hard limit storage capacity for modules, whether they are active in your load order or not, without causing obvious problems. Skyrim SE's limit is 512, but if you use the mod engine fixes, that limit rises to 2,048. As far as I know, Skyrim LE, Fallout 3, Oblivion, and Morrowind are stuck at 512. Fallout New Vegas has a floating number that starts somewhere around 110. Fallout 4 doesn't have a limit at all, and newer games most likely won't either, but that's to be determined. Again, this is for the total number of modules, including those that are just sitting in your data folder but are not actually being loaded into the game, so don't use your data folder as a storage location. Skyrim SE, having the mod engine fixes, is a good example to expand upon the luxury of ESLs. You're going to do a little basic math. Take a moment, shake it off, breathe. So, Skyrim SE has a limit of 255 active regular modules. If you use any amount of ESLs, the active limit becomes 254 regular modules. Now, knowing that the game's data folder has a hard limit of 512 modules, you can determine how many ESLs you can actually use if you max out your regular plugin limit. A 512 storage capacity minus 254 active regular modules allows you to use an additional 259 ESLs. If you use 100 regular modules, you can use 412 ESLs, so on. Using the mod engine fixes raises this limit to 2,048. This means that with engine fixes installed, your load order limit becomes 254 regular plugins and 1,794 ESL flagged files. .esp files begin their existence as non-master modules with no flags and can be organized anywhere in your load order after .esms and .esls, as well as after other ESPs with an ESM flag. If an ESP has an ESM flag, such as some unofficial patches do, it will load before other ESPs that do not have the ESM flag. Using a program like Xedit, you can give ESPs an ESM flag to make them act like an ESM file, forcing them to load higher in the load order, or give them an ESL flag to take them out of the 255 plugin limit and still be able to organize them towards the bottom of your load order. Again, ESLs are expanded upon in their own video. Dummy modules are files that are used specifically to load Bethesda archives into the game. They do nothing else. They are expanded upon in the asset load order video and are not something to be concerned with for this one. Apps like Loot are fantastic. It allows you to sort your load order at a click of a button. Where many new modders get confused and/or lazy is in the understanding that Loot cannot solve every single load order issue. If you are not using a lot of mods, Loot may very well be all that you ever need in one click. But when you start adding hundreds of mods, editing them, and perhaps even creating your own, the need for adjustment grows. A good example of this is Warbug's Paper World map for Skyrim. Even though Loot sorts it where you see it in this load order, if I do not drag it right near the end, it's going to have glitches. Loot cannot force this to happen for everyone's load order, and it has to be done manually. Use Loot. Take the time to learn it. After you use it, you should still look over your load order and be sure that things are to your liking. As the author of Loot himself will tell you, Loot is not the ending, it's the beginning. A special thank you to our poet lords, Watch Hill, The Man Dread, 1957, and Trotsky for their charitable contributions and support. This has been Modding 101. Congratulate yourself for making it to the end of the lesson. It's not a joke. You did a great job making it here. It's a lot to take in, and you did it. I am Michael of GamerPoets. I hope to see you next time.